You need to start paying your way. Those were the first words out of my stepfather's mouth as I lay in a hospital bed, fresh out of emergency surgery. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. My abdomen burned every time I tried to breathe too deeply. Machines blinked and beeped all around me, proof I was barely stitched back together. I told him I couldn't work. Doctor's orders. 2 weeks minimum. No lifting. No shifts. No exceptions. His hand came down before I even finished the sentence. The world jerked sideways. My shoulders slammed the rail. My body slid, dragging the sheets with me. The floor was freezing against my cheek. I tasted blood and saline and something metallic that might have been fear. My hands shook so hard I could hear the 4-line clattering. "Stop faking it," he growled above me. "You're not that fragile." By the time security and nurses flooded the room, by the time the police were called and everyone stared at him like he'd just turned into a monster in front of their eyes, I already knew something they didn't. This wasn't the worst thing he'd ever done. This was just the first time anyone else had seen it. My name is Emma. I'm in my late 20s. Before that hospital room became the stage for the ugliest moment of my life, my world was very small and very ordinary. I worked in retail during the day, sore feet, fake smiles, discount codes, and at night I took on any creative freelance work I could find. Design gigs, small branding projects, odd jobs that barely paid but kept my portfolio alive. It wasn't glamorous. It barely qualified as stable. But it kept the lights on in the house my dad left us. The house that was supposed to be our security after everything else fell apart. My real dad died slowly. Not in a dramatic, everyone rushes to the hospital kind of way. In the quiet way that sends one medical bill after another until you stop opening envelopes. A new test. A new prescription. A new specialist. Little by little, our savings drained away, siphoned off in numbers on paper, and payments withdrawn in the middle of the night. By the time we buried him, we were exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with grief. After the funeral, our home didn't feel like a home anymore. It sounded wrong. His laugh wasn't echoing down the hallway. His boots weren't by the back door. His jacket still hung on the hook where he'd left it, as if he might come back for it any second. His chipped coffee mug waited, unwashed, in the sink because neither of us could bring ourselves to move it. My mom tried to be strong. I could see her doing the math in her head every time she opened a bill. I'd catch her staring at the kitchen table, shoulders hunched, lips pressed together, calculating how long we had before the bank stopped being patient. Grief bent her a little more every month. That's when my stepfather appeared. He didn't swagger in like a villain. He showed up like an answer. Polite. Competent. The kind of man people describe as solid and reliable at barbecues. He spoke in plans, not platitudes. He told my mom he could help straighten out the paperwork. Said he understood numbers. Knew how to negotiate with lenders. Knew how the system worked. He told her she'd carried everything alone for too long. That she deserved to rest. 6 months later, they were married. I remember standing in the living room after the small ceremony, watching him bring in boxes like the house had always been waiting for him. He put his keys in the same bowl my dad had used. Hung his coat on the same hook. Walked our halls like he was syncing himself up to the place. At first, nothing felt obviously wrong. If anything, things looked easier. Bills stopped piling up on the table because he took care of them. My mom didn't spend her evenings with a calculator anymore. When I asked about due dates or balances, she'd smile a little too brightly and tell me not to worry, that he was handling it, that he was good with that stuff. If I pushed, I was told I was being ungrateful. That I should be happy someone wanted to help us. That I didn't understand how lucky we were to have a man step in, especially after everything my dad's illness had done to our finances. So I backed off. I went to work. I paid rent to stay in my own childhood bedroom. I told myself that this was adulthood. You compromise. You adjust. You live with people's flaws because that's what families do. Then my mom started changing. It was small at first. She'd walk into a room and forget why she was there. She'd leave the stove on and wander away. She'd stop mid-sentence, eyes clouded, like her thoughts had gotten stuck somewhere she couldn't reach. My stepfather called it stress. "She's been through so much," he'd say, hand on her shoulder. She just needs time. Every morning, he'd line up her vitamins on the counter. Little pills in a row, different sizes and colors. He'd stand there, watching carefully while she swallowed each one with her coffee. If she hesitated, his smile tightened until she finished. I told myself he was being attentive, that I was projecting, that I was still clinging to a dad who wasn't coming back. And then my body betrayed me. The pain hit out of nowhere. One minute I was brushing my teeth. The next, a knife of white-hot agony sliced through my stomach. My knees gave out on the bathroom tile. I couldn't straighten up, couldn't breathe properly. Every inhale just more fire. My appendix had decided it had had enough. The next hours blurred. Sirens, fluorescent lights, signatures pushed under my hand, oxygen mask, the awful sweetness of anesthesia rushing up at me. When I woke up, time felt wrong. The room spun in slow circles. There was a pulling, tearing sensation deep in my side every time I shifted. The surgeon explained it as simply as possible. They'd gone in, taken out what was trying to kill me, closed me up. No lifting. No work. 2 weeks minimum of rest, or I could tear something open inside and end up right back on the table. So when my stepfather walked into that room the next morning, I thought that's what we'd talk about. Logistics. Groceries. Rent. Maybe even concern. He didn't say hello. The door clicked shut with a precise, final sound. I saw his reflection in the polished metal of the cabinet doors across from my bed. Jaw clenched. Back straight. Not a man worried about a recovering patient, a man already mid-argument. He started talking about money before he even reached me. The hospital bills. The mortgage. All the things backing up. How my freelance work barely counted. How retail wasn't a career. How he and my mom had been carrying me for too long. I swallowed, trying not to grimace at the pain it caused. I repeated what the doctor told me. 2 weeks. No shifts. No standing for 8 hours at a register. No hauling boxes. It wasn't optional. He laughed. Not a big laugh. Just a short, quiet sound that somehow hurt more than shouting would have. Like I'd said something pathetic. You need to start earning your keep, he said. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. I was in a hospital gown. Attached to and for. I hadn't even walked to the bathroom by myself yet. How was this a conversation we were having? I tried again. I needed time to heal. I wasn't refusing to work forever. I physically couldn't yet. His face shifted. Some mask slipped. What stared back at me wasn't annoyed or stressed. It was cold. Calculating. Like he'd been waiting for an excuse to stop pretending. He leaned in just enough for his voice to drop, but not enough to look like a threat from the hallway. You're not sick. You're dramatic. Stop acting helpless. Then his hand connected with my face. There was no wind-up, no warning. One moment I was propped against the pillow. The next the whole world came apart. My vision flashed white. My ear rang. The bed rail caught my hip as I toppled, and the floor punished the rest of me. The cold shot through my thin gown. My mouth filled with the copper taste of blood where my lip had split. I remember staring at the little pattern on the tiles inches from my eye, thinking how stupid it was that the hospital hadn't fixed the crack in the grout. My hands fluttered uselessly, trying to push myself up. Not out of fear. Out of disbelief. Get up, he snapped above me. Stop pretending you're weak. And then noise. Shoes slamming into the room. The clatter of the 4-stand. Someone yelling for security. A nurse's sharp intake of breath. A voice snapping, "Don't move her. Don't touch her." A woman in scrubs knelt beside me, her hand hovering near my shoulder, not daring to press down. She told me to stay still. Her tone was controlled, but her eyes, that's where the fury lived. By the time the police arrived, my stepfather had already shifted into performance mode. He talked fast, loud enough for everyone to hear. Words like misunderstanding and she slipped and she's emotional tangled together in a practiced rhythm. His smile was stretched too tight, smeared over a face that didn't quite match it. I lay there, staring up at the ceiling lights, listening. And something inside me went very, very still. That slap wasn't a mistake. It was him finally saying out loud what he'd been showing us in quieter ways for months. I left the hospital a day later than planned. Not because my wounds weren't healing, but because everyone moved with this careful, padded gentleness now. Security hovered. Nurses checked on me more often. The social worker's business card found its way into my discharge paperwork. People watched my stepfather too closely for his liking. While he argued with the front desk about some fee on the bill, one of the nurses slipped a small folded card into my hand. No explanations. Just a look that said, "Please read this." I didn't open it until that night. Stepping back into our house after the hospital felt like stepping into a stranger's skin. Familiar surroundings, wrong fit? The walls looked closer. The air felt heavier. My mom hovered, flustered and shaking. She kept starting to do things, then stopping halfway, as if she'd forgotten what was next. She apologized constantly for the noise, for the smell of dinner, for moving too slowly. She kept saying sorry for being such a burden. My stepfather acted like nothing at all out of the ordinary had happened. He cooked. He told some story about traffic and made himself laugh. He complimented the neighbor's lawn through the window. When my mom struggled to answer a simple question, he cut in smoothly, finishing her sentence for her. When she winced, he was suddenly there with her little row of pills, watching until each one was gone. Painkillers made my days muzzy at the edges, but in that soft blur, certain things became painfully sharp. Patterns. The way my mom's confusion seemed worse at certain times of day. The way she was clearer when she forgot her vitamins. The way paperwork vanished the moment I asked to see it. Payments I knew I'd made somehow weren't showing up anywhere. That night, I finally unfolded the card from the hospital. It wasn't just a phone number. It was a website. Resources. Words I had never applied to my life before. Financial abuse. Medical coercion. Isolation. They weren't written like horror stories. They were bullet points. Lists. Common tactics. And almost every single one felt like someone had been watching my house and taking notes. A few days later, our neighbor showed up with a pot of soup. The normal, kind thing people do when there's been a health scare. She stepped into the kitchen, set it down, and watched my mom shuffle by like a ghost in slippers. Then she leaned closer to me, voice low. "My daughter's a nurse," she whispered. "She's concerned. About how your mom's been. About the meds she's on. If you ever want to talk, we're right next door." That night, while my stepfather watched TV in the living room, I walked down the hallway to the room he always kept locked. The lock wasn't built to keep out someone determined. It was built for show. Inside, the space was too organized. No clothes. No stray items. Just shelves and a desk. Folders stacked in perfectly aligned rows, each one labeled in his neat, sharp handwriting. Insurance. Claims. Policies. Benefits. My nails bit into my palm as I opened the first folder with my mom's name on it. I didn't even finish the first page before my heartbeat started thudding in my ears. Life insurance policies. Increases. Adjustments to beneficiaries. Dates that lined up a little too neatly with when my mom started forgetting things and needing more help. Applications filed right after major doctor visits. I flipped to another. Then another. The money he'd been so worried about at my bedside. How much of it was really about our bills, and how much was about what he stood to collect if my mom got just a little sicker. I put everything back exactly how I'd found it. I couldn't risk him knowing I'd seen. That night, I lay in my childhood bed staring at the same crack in the ceiling I'd counted through breakups and finals and my dad's chemo. I was terrified. But under the terror was something so focused it felt almost calm. I stopped arguing with my stepfather after that. I let him believe his performance was still working. I stayed quiet when he talked over my mom. I didn't flinch when he snapped at me. I moved slowly, like I was still physically fragile, like that slap had broken more than my lip. He relaxed. Predators love compliance. They read silence as surrender. While he got comfortable, I started building a case. You learn a lot about a person when you follow the paper trail they think no one will ever bother tracing. I looked up every name he'd let slip over dinner, every place he'd said he used to live, public marriage records, court filings, old addresses. It didn't take long to find her. Then another her. Then another. Different cities. Different years. The same pattern repeating like a bad song on loop. quick relationships, financial entanglements, sudden health issues, nasty legal battles, women who disappeared back into their own lives with nothing but debt and confusion trailing behind them. I sent one message to the first woman I found. No accusations. Just, "Hi, my name is Emma. I think we might have someone important in common. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry to bother you. If I'm not, could we talk?" Her reply came less than an hour later. "You too." She connected me to a small group chat with other women who'd known him under different last names, in different states. They didn't rant. They didn't embellish. They laid out dates, documents, accounts closed without notice, sudden illnesses that no doctor could explain until they'd left him. One of them had paralegal experience. Another had saved everything: emails, texts, financial statements. They told me what they wished they'd seen sooner. They didn't tell me what to do. They just made it clear I wasn't crazy. "Our neighbor's daughter, the nurse, came by one afternoon to check on your mom and say hello. She sat at the kitchen table, chatting lightly, while my stepfather bustled around making smoothies for her strength. She watched him mix powder from an unmarked container into my mom's glass. Her face didn't move. But later, when my stepfather went out to take a call in the driveway, she turned to me. "I can't give medical advice in this situation," she said carefully. "I don't have access to full records. And I'm not saying this is intentional. But those combinations in those amounts, combined with how your mom's been, it doesn't sit right with me. At all." That was enough. I started writing everything down. What time my mom took her pills. What she ate. How she acted an hour after. What my stepfather said on the phone. How many minutes he spent in that locked room. Every odd little detail I might need later. I didn't go through his files again. I didn't need to. He'd grown careless. Confident that he'd already won. He made calls in the living room now. He muttered about payouts and timelines, assuming I wasn't really listening. Then one evening, he waltzed in holding a folder like it was a trophy. He was smiling, relaxed, radiating the easy charm that had hooked my mom when she was drowning. He called us into the dining room and laid the folder out on the table. "It's nothing to worry about," he told my mom gently. "The lawyer just suggested this in case you ever have trouble making decisions. Just a safety net. Temporary power of attorney. We'll keep everything in the family. You sign here, and I can handle things if you're confused." Her hand shook when she picked up the pen. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might shake my stitches loose. I could feel that crossroad humming in the room. Sign, and he owned everything. Refuse, and he'd know I was onto him. So I chose a third option. "Shouldn't we do this with someone there?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Like at the lawyer's office or with a witness. I don't want us to mess it up and have to redo it." "It sounds important." He paused, just for a fraction of a second. But I saw the calculation behind his eyes. Then he smiled like I'd said something adorable. "You're right," he said. "We'll schedule it next week." No big deal. That week changed everything. The women I'd met online helped me figure out what actually mattered legally. What counted? What didn't? What to copy? What to screenshot? Which agencies to contact? Which hotlines were legitimate and which were just there to offer support without teeth? I told my story over and over again to people who'd heard it all before: social workers, advocates, quiet professionals whose job was to listen and then decide if what they were hearing was actionable. I stuck to facts. No dramatics. Dates. Names. Documents. The photos of my bruised face from the hospital. The folder labels I remembered. The pills. The vitamins. They didn't look surprised. They looked like people who'd been waiting for my call. The plan came together faster than I'd expected. One night, my stepfather announced he'd be out late for his community sports league. He never missed it. He loved the way people looked at him there, like he was the fun, dependable guy who always picked up the tab. He left the house in a good mood. Kissed my mom on the forehead. Told us not to wait up. Tossed a joke over his shoulder about how I shouldn't overdo it while he was gone, like I was a fragile child who might break a dish. 30 minutes after his car pulled out of the driveway, the doorbell rang. Then rang again. Then the house filled. Not with chaos. With order. badges, clipboards, plainclothes officers, a medical team. They spoke softly to my mom, introduced themselves, explained things slowly. They wrapped her in a coat, helped her into a car for further evaluation. They went through the house methodically, collecting medications, labeling bottles, carefully boxing up folders from the locked office I'd once broken into. Everything was documented. Everything signed off. No one yelled. Across town, at that same time, someone put a hand on my stepfather's shoulder while he laughed with his teammates. I wasn't there, but I've heard the story enough times now to see it. How he tried to joke at first. How he insisted it was all a misunderstanding. How he started to talk faster when they didn't melt at his smile. How the room slowly went quiet around him as the word investigation landed. How the same men he'd just been drinking with suddenly didn't want to be too close. By the time they brought him back to our house, it didn't belong to him anymore. He stepped inside and saw my mom sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, clear-eyed in a way she hadn't been in months. He saw strangers carefully carrying out labeled boxes from his office. He saw empty hooks where his jacket had hung. And he saw me. Not backing into a corner. Not trembling. Standing in the doorway. Straight-backed. Calm. He tried one more time. Tried to catch my eye. Tried to spin some new version of the truth where he was only trying to help. Where I'd misunderstood. Where I was overreacting. Where this officers in our living room, my mom in protective care, was all a big family issue that outsiders didn't need to be involved in. Families handle things privately, he said. I looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd struck me in a hospital bed because my pain cost him money. At the man who'd slowly ground my mother down and called it caregiving. The truth doesn't need hiding, I said quietly. You do. For the first time, his bravado cracked. Panic flashed across his face, sharp and ugly, before he caught it. He turned to say something else, some last-minute bargain or threat, but the officers were already guiding him out of the door. He didn't get a final speech. He got the click of handcuffs and the sound of our front door closing behind him. What came next wasn't cinematic. It wasn't a single satisfying bang of a gavel and justice served. It was paperwork. It was lab results confirming what we'd suspected about the medications my mom had been taking. It was financial auditors combing through accounts and finding gaps and transfers and quiet little thefts I hadn't even known to look for. It was other people stepping forward. Women from his past, neighbors who'd seen things, a pharmacist who'd had a bad feeling. It was a slow, steady stacking of stories and evidence until there was no room left for him to wriggle. My mom stayed under observation for a while. Being away from him didn't fix everything overnight, but the difference was impossible to ignore. Within days, the fog started to lift. She slept through the night for the first time in months. She finished her thoughts. The constant, reflexive "I'm sorry" disappeared from every sentence. Doctors and specialists talked to us carefully, in terms that made my stomach hurt, about how long-term manipulation and certain medication combinations can wear a person down, how someone can be harmed for a very long time without a single visible bruise. My mom listened. Quiet. Focused. When they were done, she reached over and took my hand like she used to when I was little and afraid of thunderstorms. That small, warm weight in my palm felt like getting her back. The house changed too. It didn't seem bigger or emptier. Just lighter. The air felt less thick. We opened windows. We left doors unlocked during the day. We spread our mail out on the kitchen table and went through every envelope together, highlighters in hand. No more secrets hidden in closed drawers. Friends we hadn't seen in years stopped by. Neighbors brought food, information, phone numbers. Women I'd never met messaged to say they'd heard what happened, and they were finally leaving their own versions of him. The legal process moved on its own momentum. I didn't have to fight every inch. I just had to keep telling the truth again and again. Other people picked up the rest. Judges. Attorneys. People whose job is to untangle the damage men like him leave behind. In the meantime, I went back to work in a slow, cautious way. Different hours. Boundaries I'd never thought to set before. I started volunteering with an organization the nurse's card had led me to. I learned how to recognize the signs of the kind of control that doesn't leave handprints, not because I stopped being afraid, but because I'd learned how much worse silence can be. One evening, months later, my mom walked down the hallway with a picture frame in her hand. She hung it on the wall where our old family portrait had been, where my dad's tired but gentle smile once looked down at us. In the new photo, it's just the two of us. My arm around her shoulders. Her eyes clear and steady. No extra faces. No shadows. For the first time since I was a teenager, the future felt quiet. Not empty. Not bleak. Just quiet in a way that meant peace instead of suppression. I'm telling you this because betrayal inside a family doesn't always arrive yelling. It doesn't always look like a monster walking through your front door. Sometimes it looks like help. Sometimes it sounds like, "Let me take care of that for you," while the bills disappear where you can't see them. Sometimes it tastes like vitamins handed to you by someone who insists they know what's best. Sometimes it's a hand on your shoulder guiding you for your own good, toward a pen and a document you don't understand. And sometimes it takes one horrifyingly clear moment, a slap in a hospital bed, a folder of paperwork you weren't meant to see, for everything to click into place. If any part of this feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to know two things. You're not imagining it. And you're not alone. If you've ever had to protect yourself or someone you love from the very people who were supposed to be your safe place, share your story in the comments. You never know who might recognize themselves in your words. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Someone out there might be waiting for the one that finally gives them the courage to draw their line.